The early morning mist hung low over the sleepy woods of Evergreen Hollow, shrouding the tall trees in a silver haze, while the world still stretched and yawned its way into another day, but 12-year-old Lily Thompson was already out with her late mother's worn leather journal pressed tightly to her chest, her breath fogging in the cool air, her boots squelching through the damp undergrowth as she followed the winding path behind their weathered cabin, drawn not just by curiosity but by the longing ache in her heart to feel close to her mother again, even in some small way. Lily's mother, a schoolteacher with a heart wide as the sky, had passed away a year ago after a long and cruel illness, leaving behind only memories and her journal filled with stories, dreams, and gentle advice scribbled in delicate cursive, words that had become Lily's compass in a world that now felt so big, so unfamiliar, and so cold. Her father, a quiet and hard-working logger, did what he could, but his grief had sealed him in silence, and Lily often found herself walking alone, talking to the wind, pretending the birds were answering her, imagining adventures through the woods just like the ones in her mother's stories. On this particular morning, one sentence from the journal had echoed in her heart: "Beyond the mossy bend, where the light bends low, a hidden grove holds secrets only the kind can know." Her mother had written it about a grove she once stumbled upon as a girl, a place that shimmered with mystery, and Lily, clutching the journal like a treasure map, had made up her mind to find it. She wandered deeper than she'd ever dared before, past the bubbling creek, through a clearing of fallen birch logs, until she came upon a place that felt different, quieter somehow, as if even the birds were holding their breath. And that's when she saw it. A collapsed patch of muddy earth, freshly sunken, with roots exposed and a strange shape sticking out, like a branch. But it wasn't a branch, it was a hand, limp and caked with dirt, half buried and horrifying, and Lily's blood ran cold, but something inside her sparked, not fear, but resolve, and she dropped to her knees and began digging with her bare hands, her small fingers tearing at the earth, her heart hammering as she shouted for help, though she knew no one could hear this far out. Dirt flew, her nails broke, her palms bled, and tears mixed with sweat and soil as she unearthed the face of a man, an older man, eyes shut, lips cracked and blue, breath shallow but still there, alive, and just as she screamed his name, not knowing what it was, his eyes fluttered open and he whispered, barely audible, "Safe," before slipping back into unconsciousness. Lily ran as fast as her legs would carry her, stumbling through the brush until she burst into her father's workshop, breathless and wild-eyed, dragging him back through the woods to the spot where, miraculously, the man was still clinging to life, and together they pulled him from the mud and wrapped him in blankets until the paramedics arrived, baffled and amazed, saying it was a miracle he was alive at all, that if Lily had found him even an hour later, he would have suffocated or frozen to death. And that's when they learned who he was: Walter Ellington, a reclusive millionaire who had disappeared after a storm-triggered landslide buried part of his hillside estate, and everyone had assumed he was dead. He'd been trapped underground for nearly a day, surviving only by a pocket of air and the sheer will to live, and when he finally awoke in the hospital days later, his first request was to see the girl who had saved him. Not reporters, not lawyers, not even doctors, but Lily, the little girl with dirt under her nails and fire in her heart, and when they met, he took her hand and whispered again, "You heard me," and explained that in those long, suffocating hours beneath the earth, when panic had given way to fading consciousness, he had prayed, not to God, not exactly, but to kindness itself, remembering a girl from years ago whom his late wife once tutored, a girl who had written him a letter when he donated to her school, a girl who wrote, "Even buried things deserve a second chance to bloom." He held on to that memory, onto hope, and somehow, impossibly, that whisper had reached Lily, who had never met him, never heard of him, but who had been drawn to the grove by her mother's words and her own aching heart. After his recovery, Walter came to visit Lily's home in a wheelchair, accompanied by a nurse and his attorney, and made an offer that shook the Thompson family to their core. He wanted Lily and her father to move in with him at his estate, to live there as his guests, to give Lily the education and care she deserved, not out of charity, but because he believed in repaying miracles, and because in Lily's eyes, he saw the spirit of a world he thought had long gone quiet. At first her father resisted, proud and uncertain, but after long talks with Walter, about grief, about parenting, about second chances, he agreed, and within a month they had packed their few belongings and stepped into a life they had never imagined, a world of books and music and warmth that slowly, quietly, began to heal their wounds. Walter became like a grandfather to Lily, telling her stories of the world, encouraging her to dream beyond the forest, and she in turn brought laughter and youth back into his home, planting sunflowers, reading poetry aloud, asking questions that reminded him that life, even near its end, still had wonder to offer. He paid for her schooling, found her the best tutors, and supported every creative idea she had, not to mold her, but to free her, and as she grew, Lily never lost the humility or compassion that had driven her to dig that day, never forgot the mud on her hands or the whisper that had changed both their lives. Years later, Lily would use her education not to build wealth, but to build something greater. She founded the Whisper Foundation, named in honor of the moment she first heard Walter's voice, and she traveled the country setting up shelters, youth centers, and kindness-based leadership programs in underprivileged areas, always telling the same story, not of riches or heroism, but of listening, of believing that even the buried can be saved if someone cares enough to dig. When Walter passed peacefully in his sleep at the age of 90, he left his entire estate to Lily, not out of obligation, but love, and with it, a final letter hidden in her mother's restored journal. Dear Lily, you gave me back my life when the world had already buried it. You showed me that kindness is not just a word, it's a rescue. Keep listening for the whispers. They are everywhere, waiting to be answered. And Lily did listen. She listened in soup kitchens, in refugee camps, in school playgrounds where bullied children whispered their fears, in prisons where forgotten men whispered regret, and everywhere she went, she answered with love, with presence, with belief. By the time she stood on the stage at a global youth summit decades later, hailed as one of the most inspiring leaders of her generation, Lily was still the same at heart. The girl who had followed a sentence in a journal and stumbled into someone else's salvation, and as she looked out over the audience, she smiled gently and said, sometimes, the world buries people, in mud, in grief, in silence. But never forget, the heart hears whispers long before the ears do. And sometimes, the smallest hands do the biggest digging. The room was silent as her words sank in, and somewhere deep in the crowd, a child with a worn-out notebook clutched it tighter, wondering if maybe, just maybe, they too had a whisper to follow, and a world to save.